It's the day. Weeks, months, over a year of planning leading to today. The day that I get to marry the love of my life. Welcome to We Attempt New Things and the finale of my literally life-changing project. I want to get married. Let me lead you through the entire day, start to end, and see what happened. Hang on, if I try keeping up this art style, this video is going to take way too long to make, so let's just... There we go. Back to blobs. Much easier. But let's wind back the clock to the start of the day. Less than 4 hours after falling asleep, I woke up. Wedding day. At 3 a.m. But I had a job to do. One final task to complete. I had to write a letter to Honey. She had told me that she had seen it on several of the marriage videos that she had watched on YouTube, where the groom gives his bride a letter on the day of their wedding to mark the occasion, and I didn't intend to disappoint. I was naturally an early riser, so I planned to do this when I woke up, usually around 6 a.m, but I was wide awake now, and now was when I would write it. I wrote it up on Google Docs first. I didn't want to be fumbling with words and figuring out how much space I needed when putting pen to paper, not to mention not wanting any spelling errors. Once I was satisfied, I wrote it out, put it in an envelope, and put it in my wedding day bag. A bag I had prepared with headache tablets, water, a lint roller, and a couple of other things that I may need on the day, and went back to sleep. I woke up early, as expected, gave Nugget his usual morning snuggle, showered, cleaned up my facial hair, carefully dried my hair, had breakfast, and got into my reddest sports clothes. I then left an hour earlier than I needed to. It was door games time. Leaving earlier meant that I had arrived too early, which meant I had to wait outside. The groom is not allowed to enter the house before door games are done, so I paced around outside, watching as our MCs started setting up, hanging donuts and strings for door game shenanigans. The rest of the groomsmen arrived with time to spare, and eventually the door games began. Door games were fun and went on without a hitch. We no-hands ate some donuts, shook ping-pong balls out of boxes using our twerking skills, caught onion rings on Pocky, and generally had a fun time while both my parents and soon-to-be in-laws watched on with amusement. I also had to bribe the bridesmaids. They didn't tell me how much I needed to bribe them with or what the result would be if I bribed them, but it ended up the size of my bribe reduced the difficulty of the games, as I discovered the next day. Finally, the games were done, and I took my guitar, which I was warned beforehand to take with me, up to the room where my honey awaited in a lovely Qipao-style Chinese dress. I then, for my final challenge, had to seduce her the same way that I proposed, with Ed Sheeran's Perfect. Seriously, I've gotten a lot of mileage from learning that one 4-chord song. I then had a quick rinse and got into my suit that I would be wearing for the rest of the day, then went into the room where the tea ceremony was going to be held. The rest of the attending family members piled in, and as soon as the clock hit 10, we started the tea ceremony. It went, thankfully, very smoothly. Honey received some nice jewelry, and I got a nice ring with a dragon on it and cufflinks from my grandfather. The tea was poured, the words of advice were said, and I had a sort of red bean soup thing that was served to me by Honey's parents, another traditional thing that I hadn't planned for or wasn't expecting. We ended ahead of time, so now it was time for some photos, which was when the first hiccup of the day started. I'm going to do an aside here. I may omit some things to keep anonymity on this channel, but I'll never outright lie. If learning something was hard, I'll say it. If I didn't progress in a project because I was the one at fault, I'll admit it. If someone is watching these videos to actually learn something from them, it's not going to give an honest view if I lie. So in that same vein, I'm going to be honest here. Everything started out fine. We took some photos inside with the decorations, then moved outside for the other decorations and some larger photos. Honey has a cousin with a long-term boyfriend, but they aren't engaged or anything. Something very important we learned from our photographer is that in that situation, you always make sure to have family photos with and without any non-family members. You don't want to have to airbrush out someone in the middle of a photo after a messy breakup. So of course, we asked the guy, who I'll call Steve for anonymity, to step out of the family photo while we were inside after taking one with him in it. Steve was very amicable, who understood completely and agreed, and we took it without him. All good. Then we moved outside to the larger group photos. We're waiting and waiting and waiting and... Where is Honey's family? we're on a time limit here. I have to go soon, and Honey really needs to get her wedding gown on, but where's her family? It ends up that Honey's cousin has thrown a fit, thinking we're excluding her boyfriend. We had continued taking photos and hadn't explicitly invited him back into the photos because, we've got better stuff to do, like take very important tea ceremony photos. We aren't tracking people, we just trust that people are going to jump in and out of photos as the photographers say. Suddenly we're thrust into this mess. This petulant, spoiled brat, who mind you is 25, is kicking up a fuss, delaying everything, and the rest of the Chinese-speaking family is worried about her and is physically unable to communicate with anyone other than Honey. My parents go into what they dubbed Mama and Papa Bear mode and rightfully tell her off to get it together. Today is not about her, but that just causes this fully grown adult woman to cry. It's ridiculous. I'm not going to bore you with personal family politics, but the end result is that Honey's family, aside from her parents, don't participate in any more post-tea ceremony photos, though we do take plenty with my family and the bride and groomsmen that are there, but this marks a very dark spot on the day. I will once again enforce that Steve, again not his real name, is super chill and just confused as we are as to why his girlfriend is throwing a fit. We do not blame Steve, Steve is chill. He's just a bit spineless in front of his petulant child of a girlfriend. Moving on. I, along with the groomsmen, leave for the ceremony venue as Honey gets into her dress and gets her hair finished. Once dressed, she reads the card that I wrote early that same day. Apparently she cried, but we still haven't received the videos yet. Videos take a while to edit, so I can't confirm, but she said that is what she needed to hear, for lack of a better term. She too gets into the car to head to the ceremony venue. Meanwhile, I'm having a very brief warm-up with the band and welcoming the guests, getting my nerves under control. We wait and wait. Honey is 15 minutes late, but eventually I get the signal, and groomsman number 3, who I gave the responsibility of starting the aisle song, hits the play button. The aisle walk goes well. The music is, thankfully, perfectly timed. And I cry. A lot. Like, seriously, as soon as Honey got a few steps down the aisle, arm in arm with her dad, I was a mess. There are some hilarious photos of me trying to hold back the waterfalls. Her dad hands her off to me, and the ceremony begins. It goes pretty smoothly. There's a bit of an awkward moment when it's time for the first song and the celebrant doesn't know how to announce it, so I literally take the mic out of his hands and announce it for myself. I need the mic to sing anyway. We cycle through all the items, get to the vows. I do, she do, we all do. You make now, kiss the bride. Cheering, clapping, smooching, it's all good. We sign the wedding documents as the family member plays a tune, thankfully very short. We filled out a lot of it the night before while we were setting up to save time, and then we started the next song. It's done, we gather everyone into the center of the venue and take a lovely group photo. We direct everyone to grab some confetti, they arrange themselves outside, and Honey and I exit the venue to a shower of petals. Wonderful. Aside from a couple of clunky transitions, the ceremony was complete without a hitch. And then I look at the time. We're 20 minutes early. Mind you, Honey arrived, due to no fault of her own, just dealing with more cousin drama nonsense, 15 minutes late, so to end 20 minutes early means that the ceremony was like 25 minutes tops, when in the sacred run sheet, it was timed out to be around an hour or so. I guess document signing, Bible readings, and the short message from the celebrant were given a bit of extra time in the run sheet, but geez. This poses a bit of a strange issue. Honey doesn't want to take family photos yet because the makeup person is coming around to do a touch-up that we scheduled in around half an hour's time. Normally that would be about 5 to 10 minutes after the ceremony, but the ceremony has ended early. Thankfully, our photographer has a good suggestion, getting my photos out of the way first. So while we wait, I'm taking photos with my family, getting all the groom-only photos done, but even so, I'm done with all those photos before the makeup person has even arrived. I'm kind of awkwardly waiting outside the photo area while Honey is sitting inside waiting for the makeup person, and everyone else is inside where the food is. Thankfully, Honey and I have some food brought out to us, and I managed to do a little bit of mingling, but I don't stray far from the photo so that I can be called back at a moment's notice. Eventually, on time, the makeup person arrives, completing Honey's makeup, and we take many more photos. Family members in various arrangements, photos with friends with groomsmen and bridesmaids, and finally some solo photos. And by solo, I mean me and Honey. Unfortunately, due to the gap between the ceremony's end and the bride readiness for the photos, some people had to leave for one reason or another, which was a shame, but we got the bulk of the photos that we wanted. I should also mention that the cousin of the boyfriend had pulled out of the wedding at this point, not coming to the ceremony or anything. Seriously, what a brat. Unfortunately, neither Honey nor I had the opportunity to go inside where the food was being served until the very end, when everyone had already cleared out and the bulk of the food was eaten, but we did manage to take photos with the decorations that were still up. Sometime during the photo taking, the wedding car arrived, though the driver was sitting there for a while, and at the end of it all, and after stuffing our faces with a few last-minute snacks to keep us going, Honey and I piled in and took a brief moment of respite as we drove to the reception venue. Those fancy car seats were some of the most comfortable I had ever sat in. Mind you, I had been standing for about 3.5 hours at this point. We drove to the reception venue with a little over an hour until the reception started. A couple of things were done. First, we had to rearrange the tables. The cousin that had pulled out of the wedding had obviously pulled out of the reception too. This was actually a blessing because it meant that we were able to rearrange some tables to be an even number instead of an odd one, but once again, what an absolute nasty piece of work. Reception dinners are not cheap per person, but whatever. We had long since made our peace with the lack of this garbage person, and it didn't bother us anymore. We then took photos on the reception grounds. More photos. So many photos. I'm not a photo sort of fella, so it was quite exhausting taking so many, but I had mentally prepared myself well in advance. We were just letting the very experienced photographers and videographers direct us as they pleased, being led around by Papa Blob, who was familiar with the area. The sun began to set, and Honey and I took a couple of lovely sunset photos. As reception guests started to arrive, the bridal party escaped to the back room where we took a few minutes to gather ourselves, get in order as the reception MCs announced our arrival. The band played us in as we entered 2 by 2, best man and maid of honor, then the bridesmaids and groomsmen, and finally Honey and myself. We had decided that we'd sit at our own table separate from the rest of the bridal party. It's fairly standard to sit with your bridal party in a big row, but we wanted to face the room with an empty chair either side of us so that rather than an exhausted Honey and I having to move to all the tables, guests could come to us, sit down, and have a chat. First course was served. We did share a platter type thing per table per course, and then it was time for the parent speeches. My parents were light and funny in their speech, predicting the future so accurately that, apparently having written the speech in a previous day, predicted the number of times I was going to cry with startling accuracy. They also pulled out a freshly washed childhood teddy bear, one that I've had since literally days after I was born, to share in the rest of the festivities. Honey's dad then gave a short speech, entirely in Shanghainese, and even though I barely understood a single word, I'm learning Mandarin, so a completely different dialect, the feelings came through, and it was really sweet of him. Next course was served, and then came the bridal party speeches. All 3 members of the bridesmaids spoke in a joint speech which was filled with sweet moments, but it was my best man who I thought had the best speech, though I'm probably biased. Needless to say, it managed to squeeze a few sniffles out of me. Dessert was served, and then it was time for my speech. And yeah, I cried some more. You know how I said I got it down to 3 tight minutes? Yeah, stuff that. Add multiple moments of me choking up, apologizing for choking up, looking up at the ceiling. I have now learned that when I'm trying to hold back tears, that's my go-to pose. Seriously, I'm not much of a crier, but trying to do heartfelt speeches is a guaranteed way to turn on the waterworks. Eventually, I got through it. Then it was Honey's turn. Thankfully, I was pretty well dry of tears at this point, so I only cried a little bit, gave her a cuddle, and together we cut the wedding cake that some family members had picked up over the course of the day. We then had our first dance where, yet again, Ed Sheeran's Perfect made an appearance, though played by a live band, so sounding much better than myself playing it on guitar. And then we started dancing to the rest of the music. The band was great. As per a request of mine, they played Wolf Peck's Animal Spirits, great song, great band, and a good time was had by all. Best of all, I was able to strip off my wedding suit jacket that I had been wearing for 12 hours. We did a fake exit for the cameras as their time was running out, to everyone holding sparklers. Then we headed back inside and I turned on my finely crafted, very well considered playlist of music, and no one joined me. Absolutely everyone was done. Many of the reception guests had been up and at them since 9 a.m. I had no idea how I still had energy. I think I had somehow gone past the point of exhaustion and tricked my brain into thinking there was still something left in the tank. Eventually, people left, as did we, and Honey and I, now husband and wife, went home and passed out. And that's it. A truncated version of the day's events. All in all, it was a wonderful day. If anything, the black spot, which was the absolute ratbag of a cousin happening early in the day, meant that it got overwritten by the events of the day and largely forgotten by the end of it. Much better than it happening at the end of the day and spoiling the last memories of it. There's just one more video left. Yes, this is labeled as the finale, but even a finale can have an epilogue. So, next wedding video, I'll be doing the following. Number 1, sharing my learnings. There's a lot of valuable things I learned during the process that I'd love to share in a very condensed fashion. 2, create the final plan. Not the plan that's been making an appearance all of these videos, but the plan that is created after all of those learnings. 3, reflections on what I'd potentially changed. There's some stuff I didn't cover that didn't feel right to slot in during the course of the day. The day wouldn't have been possible without all of the people assisting and doing all manner of jobs throughout the day. It truly reminded Honey and myself that it is not I attempt new things, but we attempt new things. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful day.